I love martial arts films. It's one of my favorite genres, and it's been far too long since I've made some kind of martial arts video on Cinemassacre. When it comes to reviewing these movies, the question is, which ones? The genre is such a rich treasure trove, it's opening a can of worms, or a can of whoop-ass. As soon as the topic arises, I get so excited, I can't even pick one area to focus on. So I decided, hey, I'll just talk about the genre as a whole with a lean on the classics of the 70s, 80s, and a little 90s. Think of it as a sampling, an introduction to martial arts films for those who might not be that familiar, and for those who are already big fans, may this help reignite the spark, share the love, and double down on all the things we find appealing about it. But first, a word from this video's sponsor. Now listen. Have you ever wanted a 6-inch tall version of me? And would you like it if this version of me arrived at your doorstep deconstructed into 300 pieces so you can build them yourself? Well, I'm excited to announce that I've teamed up with Buildables to create me, the nerd. Pre-order your Angry Video Game Nerd Buildables figure starting today. We worked hard to make sure this was the ultimate AVGN brick figure for your collection, featuring all the classic accessories that you've seen me wear into battle over the years. Composed of 315 custom pieces, follow the full color instructions step by step to build your nerd stress-free. Each figure also comes with an awesome AVGN Buildables collectible trading card, and get this, at random, 200 people will receive a trading card signed by me. How cool is that? Buildables even offers a custom display case bundle for your nerd figure at a discount and free shipping in the United States. Truly a limited edition collectible, but pre-orders will only be available for 2 weeks, so don't miss your chance to grab your very own miniature nerd while you can. Just click the link in my description below, or head over to Buildables, bldblz.com/avgn to pre-order your buildable nerd today, before they're gone forever. And we're back. I think a good starting place would be to define what makes a martial arts film. It's a very broad category. It encompasses any action film that mainly uses hand-to-hand combat. I would say my favorites are the ones that use kung fu, but since there's so many styles of fighting and from all around the world, just saying martial arts is a good catch-all term. I especially like the word art because I think of these movies very much as a physical art of the body, much like dance. There's a certain type of visual language in these films that is universally appealing. Some would say these are just dumb action movies that are all about fighting and the story and dialogue takes a back seat. Now that may often be true, but the best of them show off an elegant and highly skilled expression of the body, which is just as important as dialogue and is a big part of the communication and the drama between the performers. The build-up to the fight is one of the most classic tropes, where the fighters stare at each other to size each other up. Let me see what you got. Oh, it's like that? Both are confident they're gonna win, and as long as neither backs down, it becomes the point of no return. I'd say the trope originated in the classic westerns, especially the Sergio Leone ones with Clint Eastwood. They're strategically edited together with wide shots and close-ups. The faces speak everything. If you're gonna go for your gun, you better be sure, because I'm quicker than you.
I'll be too busy looking good.
The westerns would go from the wide to the close-up with a cut, but the martial arts films use zooms. The zooms are such a great cliche, and no matter how many times I see it, I can't get enough. Zoom, zoom, zoom! It's like the trigger when the character is insulted or instigated in some way. That's when the zoom happens.
It was my fault.
Like it's on now. It's this type of visual language that distinguishes it from the more dialogue-driven types of films. It's purely cinematic. Then there's usually a little pause from the fight where they strike a cool pose. It can either be a taunt or a show-off, or even expressing an acknowledgement to the other, like touche, the exclamation that originated in fencing. These pauses are an important component to the overall fight. From a bodybuilding perspective, Arnold Schwarzenegger says in his book, Be Useful, 7 Tools for Life, that in bodybuilding, it's not just about making a pose, it's about how you transition from one pose to the next. Like, sure, the camera takes the picture when you're in that pose, but everybody sees you moving around before you get into the next pose. And what a great metaphor for life. It's not just the big moments, it's the moments in between. There's various weapons that these films popularized, such as nunchucks, swords, sais, and even a pole or staff. Basically, all the ones the Ninja Turtles used. But almost anything can be a weapon, like when Sammo Hung used tennis rackets in Twinkle Twinkle Lucky Stars, or when Jackie Chan used a ladder in First Strike. Sometimes it's all about how cumbersome and ridiculous can the weapon be, or it's about finding the most inefficient way to fight someone, like in Kung Fu versus Yoga, when they're doing all these crazy stretches. I mean, who does that in the middle of a fight? One of my favorite martial arts tropes is the breakaway props. This became much more prevalent in the 80s. It usually has to do with the setting for the fight. Like in a video game, you have different backgrounds. If the fight is in a warehouse, you bet your ass there's going to be a pile of boxes that gets knocked down. You know I love boxes. But there's nothing better than seeing furniture getting smashed, glass getting shattered, and walls being utterly demolished. This is the type of stuff I live for. The rest of the movie could be mediocre, but it's always worth it, as long as there's one good hit that sends somebody flying slow motion through the air into a crashing spectacle. You know it's coming as soon as you see the wind-up, and when the anticipation's satisfied, you can't help but cheer. Ooh! And maybe it's just that there's something therapeutic about seeing some bad guys get clobbered. It's no wonder that many actors have gotten seriously hurt making these films. They risk their lives all for the sake of entertainment. One of the most common stunts is hanging from a moving vehicle. Take, for example, Cynthia Khan in the Line of Duty 4 or Jackie Chan in Police Story. The trope can be dated back to the silent era with all the Buster Keaton stunts, and later all the Zorro film serials of the late 30s. Spielberg revived it with Raiders of the Lost Ark, but I think the Hong Kong action films perfected it and made it even scarier. In Hollywood, this sort of thing was more regulated with certain laws that didn't exist in Hong Kong. Another terrifying stunt you see very often in these films is a fall from a great height and actually hitting the ground without any fall pads or cutaways. Take, for example, Yuan Biao in Millionaire's Express, also known as Shanghai Express. In one continuous shot, he jumps from a burning building, hits the ground, gets up, and continues acting.
I'm all right. Keep going.
And in Righting Wrongs, he jumps from a plane. Jackie Chan was also no stranger to heights. I'll always remember in his book, I Am Jackie Chan, possibly the best autobiography I've ever read, he describes his 60-foot drop from the clock tower in Project A. He says while the marketing says he has no fear, in truth, he was scared so much that he bailed out twice. The third time, he told his crew to leave him there, hanging alone, so he had no choice but to fall. Doesn't that give you goosebumps just thinking about it? Plus, he ended up doing the fall 3 times, as you can see in 3 angles. Sure, the awnings must have softened the fall somewhat, but that does not look like a good day. I don't know if anyone remembers, but one of my early YouTube videos that I made was Top 10 Jackie Chan Stunts, and at the time, it was the most views I had on any video, proving Jackie Chan's universal appeal. His legacy can be attributed to how he communicates visually by studying the masters like Buster Keaton and Harold Lloyd. Many of his stunts are sort of remakes of stunts that either Keaton or Lloyd already performed, but Jackie also invented plenty of his own. Using facial expressions and body language, he made himself appealing as an international star, and combined with his charming nature, that's why he's been my all-time favorite actor. But you have to give credit to his whole team and everyone around him who gets all beaten up. In Police Story, he pulls out a gun to stop a moving bus. When the bus hits the brakes, the men smash through the window. Now, the stunt actors were supposed to land on the car and roll off, which would have absorbed more of the impact. However, the bus stopped short, as to not hit Jackie, and the men hit the street. Ouch. To sum it up, the physical dexterity and stamina and the uncompromised authentic dangers are one of the major things that makes this genre so exciting to me. Even when there's more fighting and less stunts, it's still very obvious that you're watching people with an almost inhuman type level of skill. Any actor can train for a few months, learn some martial arts moves, and make a kick-ass fight scene, but you can tell when you're watching the real deal, when it's true, lifelong, dedicated martial artists. Also, when you watch older martial arts movies, especially the ones from the Shaw Brothers studio in Hong Kong, there's a sense that you're getting something authentic. These movies have a closer connection and heritage when it comes to kung fu. Martial arts films come from all over the world, but in the 70s, the vast majority were from Hong Kong and Taiwan, and the Shaw Brothers were the biggest source. I especially like the period piece films, the ones actually set in ancient China, because those feel closer to the roots. You get the sense that the wardrobe is faithful, the settings are authentic, and those are the real moves. Many of these films even depict the Shaolin Temple and the origin of Kung Fu. So in a way, you're absorbing some of the culture and getting some historical context. There's a sense of wisdom and self-discipline that come from these films that harkens back to a more spiritual time.
Don't concentrate on the finger or you will miss all that heavenly glory.
There's a certain set of beliefs, laws, and a code of conduct. There's always a scene where a teacher is giving advice.
The way to control your breathing is to let your strength flow around your body.
It's no secret George Lucas referenced many of these tropes in Star Wars. I mean, who could forget Master Yoda and all his words of wisdom?
You must unlearn what you have learned.
Mr. Miyagi, Splinter, and even Mickey from the Rocky films call back to the archetype of the elderly mentor who passes on his knowledge to a younger generation. It seems nowadays old age gets a bad rep, but these films speak of a time when old age meant wisdom and experience. It's always some old guy, sometimes with a beard or maybe a wig. Sometimes he's kind of funny. My favorite of these actors is Yuen Su-tin. I did my best to pronounce that. He's also known as Old Dirty from the films Snake and Eagle Shadow, Drunken Master, and Dance of the Drunk Mantis. These films were directed by his son, Yuen Wu-ping, who went on to direct countless films including Iron Monkey and choreographed The Matrix, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Kill Bill Volumes 1 and 2. The teacher usually reserves his training only for the select pupil who proves they want it badly enough.
Yes, too old to begin the training.
It's almost like this is the first test. Or sometimes there's another reason he's hesitant. He has regret over a past student who went on to become the villain. In 5 Deadly Venoms, the teacher explains how he trained a group that became a dangerous clan.
What I taught them could be used wrongly for evil, to hurt men.
The student will do whatever it takes to get the teacher to train them. One of the funniest scenes is Shaolin versus Llama, when the would-be student baits the teacher with chicken. But the teacher manages to grab the chicken and fight while eating it. He's supposed to be all wise and elegant, but he eats like a savage animal. So after the teacher plays hard to get and finally agrees to train the student, he gives the student hell. It goes beyond training and is more like a form of torture, as if this is the second part of the test, to see if the student can exceed his capacity for physical abuse. The training methods can be very creative through their cruelty. In The Fearless Hyena, the student has to do a handstand with a hot bowl of tea over his crotch. Some films are almost nothing but training scenes, such as the 36 Chamber Shaolin starring Gordon Liu, also known as the Master Killer. He even got his turn to play the nasty teacher in Kill Bill Volume 2. The teacher gives very little acknowledgement for a job well done, no encouragement except maybe a casual head nod. For the most part, he just puts the hero to his absolute limits, and if he caves in and quits, it was never meant to be. The teacher likes to sit on the hero or take advantage of him in some way, perhaps to see if he can endure being humiliated and pissed off. Yoda kind of touches on this trope by making Luke carry him on his back.
Yes, the Jedi strength flows from the Force.
But another funny example is in Full Contact 93, where the teacher sits in a comfy chair and makes the student carry it around. Asshole teachers can be found everywhere, from the streets of LA to ancient China, and even to the swamps of Dagobah. But when it comes to training, there is no better trope than the montage. Everybody loves a good training montage. In the world of martial arts, it's a necessity, and it carried over to the John Avildsen films, Rocky and The Karate Kid. This is where the protagonist has to push themselves to advance to the highest level of human strength and intellect. This is a trope that we've seen thousands of times, but it never gets old. I think the reason why is because it speaks to the viewer in a way that says the most ordinary person, through hard work and determination, could rise up and overcome the odds. After that, we get a final confrontation between hero and villain. Almost always, this is the best fight of the whole film. You could have a mediocre or straight up shitty movie, but if it ends with a good fight, it's worth it. Anytime you're in doubt, just skip to the end. The final fight is what it's all about. One of the best final fights I'd recommend is Drunken Master 2, also known as Legend of the Drunken Master, when it finally had a wide release in the United States. When I saw this in theaters in 2000, I was blown away, and then I had to go watch every Jackie Chan movie I could find. What I like so much about Jackie Chan fights is that the villain totally overpowers him. Unlike the Bruce Lee films where he hardly ever gets hit, Jackie Chan gets his ass beat. That makes it so much more exciting. It seems he has no chance of winning, but then he adapts a new method or does something unorthodox to turn the fight around, such as getting piss-ass drunk. One of the funniest things about the older martial arts movies, mainly from the late 70s and early 80s, is that they often end very abruptly. The movie just stops, sometimes immediately when the fight is over, and sometimes even on the final blow. You gotta love it. Another funny thing is how common it is for martial arts movies to have multiple titles, to the point where it can be extremely confusing. The classic example is The Big Boss being retitled Fists of Fury in the United States, but the next film happened to be called Fist of Fury, so they changed it to the Chinese connection as a way of capitalizing on the success of the French connection. These movies were shamelessly exploitive, made with a producer's mindset of how to cash in on whatever they thought the public wanted at the time. Titles changed by region, or maybe the TV version had a different title. Then there was VHS, DVD. Sometimes these movies got retitled every single time they were re-released. Royal Warriors, which came out in '86, was retitled In the Line of Duty, and Yes Madam, which came out in '85, a year before Royal Warriors, was retitled In the Line of Duty 2, which means the sequel came out before the first one. There's also an entirely different movie called Royal Warriors '88, which was also known as Hands of Death, Ninja Operation 7, and Secret of the Lost Empire. There's many examples of different films sharing the same title, such as Full Contact 92 Hong Kong, starring Chow Yun-fat, and Full Contact 93 Hollywood, starring Jerry Trimble. And then there's Above the Law 86 Hong Kong, also known as Righting Wrongs, starring Cynthia Rothrock and Yuen Biao, and Above the Law 88 Hollywood, starring Steven Seagal. Also, each release might be a different edit, and even the dubbing may be different.
What do you think? Do you think he's dead yet?
I'm pretty sure he's been given the sack.
I guess he wasn't carrying his weight.
I usually prefer subtitles, but some of these movies have really funny dubs, such as Ninja in the Dragon's Den.
You listen to this, I'm gonna kill your ass! You son of a bitch!
If you're not watching it dubbed, well, here's what you're missing.
I'm the monkey god, here to make a monkey out of you, you ugly stinking skunk fucker!
Now you can't even jerk off.
During the VHS era, getting introduced to these films was a much different experience. The first one I rented from the video store was Enter the Dragon. It's not the best martial arts film, it's not even the best Bruce Lee film, but it served as the perfect gateway to the genre and got me fascinated just as it had done to the entire world back in the 70s. Until then, my knowledge of martial arts films was limited to Karate Kid, Ninja Turtles, and comedies in the 90s like Family Matters, Wayne's World 2, and Dumb and Dumber. I always enjoyed these parody scenes, but didn't understand the full scope of what they were spoofing. Also, the video games I was playing were full of references that I wasn't aware of. The plot of Mortal Kombat is sort of a retelling of Enter the Dragon with the big tournament, and the Dhalsim character from Street Fighter was clearly inspired by the guy with the stretching arms from Master of the Flying Guillotine. Also, all the sound effects in Street Fighter sound like they were directly lifted from those kind of movies. You gotta love those sound effects. Looking back, Double Dragon, Final Fight, Streets of Rage, they all felt like old school martial arts movies. And likewise, the movies felt like video games to begin with. In Game of Death, Bruce Lee has to go up a series of stairs, which is just like ascending the levels or stages. And on each floor, he fights a different boss character. One of my favorites is Tower of Death, also known as Game of Death 2. This is part of the Bruceploitation genre, which could be a whole video in itself. Anyway, the last 20 minutes is pure gold. The hero fights a guy outside a temple, then enters a secret door in the ground, which brings him into the bad guy's lair. He picks up some nunchucks and beats up a bunch of other guys. Then he goes down an elevator, which feels like a cutscene to the next stage. And this is where it gets really awesome. He comes into a lab where everybody is now wearing shiny silver uniforms. He takes them all out, knocking one of them into a pool of red acid, which apparently kills him. Once that stage is cleared, a sliding door opens, Star Trek style, and out comes a boss character dressed as Fred Flintstone. The hero finds a weapon upgrade, a steel pole, and halfway through the battle he loses it. The boss picks up a crate, but he jump kicks through it. The next level, he has to come through a hallway, but the floor is explosive to the touch. So he has to use a grappling hook to climb over. Then he fights another boss who uses a staff with a blade on both ends. And then at last, he comes to the final boss who's been sitting in a throne waiting the whole time. The fight moves from the floor up to the balcony and then back down to the floor again. Then the boss goes into phase 2, attacking with a staff, which eventually comes unsheathed as it's really a sword. In the end, the boss is impaled and then kicked into a coffin for good measure. And that is everything that happens in just the final scene. So it almost seems this whole genre was like the invention of video games, and after video games reference the films reference the games. The two that come to mind, which make explicit references to the Street Fighter games, are Super Lady Cop and City Hunter. It's crazy. Jackie Chan and company impersonating different Street Fighter characters. What more could you want? In the 90s, there was no musical artist that I think put martial arts back on the map as much as the Wu-Tang Clan, using audio samples from old martial arts films, naming themselves after characters like Ghostface Killer from The Mystery of Chess Boxing, Master Killer, Old Dirty, and so on. And many of these movies were re-released on VHS as the Wu-Tang Collection, and whether or not they had anything to do with that, their influence is undeniable. RZA said that he considers the tongue to be a sword, and that if you think you're the best lyricist, you better be using the Wu-Tang sword. It shows you can adapt the philosophy of martial arts into almost anything.
Do you think your Wu-Tang sword can defeat me?
The VHS set is where I first saw Drunken Wu-Tang, originally known as Taoism Drunkard. It's one of the craziest movies I've ever seen. I mean, just look. If you want a movie that will make your brain go numb, then go find it, and good luck. Then there's The Dragon Lives Again, in which the soul of Bruce Lee is in the afterlife and meets up with Dracula, James Bond, Popeye, Clint Eastwood, and The Godfather, I guess. I could talk about these movies for hours, but I think I covered some good ground for now. If you're big on these films, I hope you enjoyed this, and if you're new to them, I hope it piqued your interest. Consider it an invitation. So step into the dojo and enter the martial arts genre.